Live from Texas, this is the Will Cain Show. Just in the last 5 minutes, a Louisiana judge determined that the Trump administration provided enough evidence to deport anti-Israel activist and Columbia University graduate Mahmoud Khalil. Khalil's team now has until April 23rd to respond, but this is a big deal. The judge finding Mahmoud Khalil removable. The White House defended his removal, with the standard being that his beliefs, statements, and associations compromise U.S. foreign policy interests. Now let's break down the history. In December 22, Khalil entered the country on a student visa to pursue a master's degree at Columbia. The next year, following the October 7th attack on Israel, he became involved in activism, serving as a spokesperson for the university's Apartheid Divest group. That's the same organization that staged mass protests causing chaos on campus and students and with faculty. Fast forward to 2024. Khalil obtained his green card while completing his graduate studies. Then, last month, DHS agents arrested Khalil, moved him to a detention center in Louisiana, and sought to deport him. That's when a federal judge stepped in and blocked his deportation for that time being. That brings us to today. Mahmoud Khalil ruled removable. Joining me now is the author of the new book entitled On Democracies and Death Cults. It's Douglas Murray. Douglas, great to see you.
Great to be with you, Will.
This case has been a fascinating one that has ignited some debate. The debate sort of precedes what just happened in this court. It is whether or not someone in the United States, a permanent resident, can be availed with the full rights of the First Amendment, or whether or not the Constitution of the United States is in essence a suicide pact towards views that would undermine not just Western civilization, but the United States. On the other hand, it appears that the Secretary of State met the burden required, that in order to have this visa revoked, it was proved he was a threat to U.S. foreign policy. Your thoughts?
I think this has been an extraordinary case, Will, and if I can say so, at the outset, I always like to say when the issue of Mahmoud Khalil comes up, that he has become such a free speech hero for sections of the left and the right in America. But I always say, whenever they try to make him some kind of martyr, remember the name Edan Alexander. He is a 21-year-old who was born in New Jersey and is still, after 18 months, being held by the terrorist group Hamas in Gaza. If the people who had campaigned for Khalil's release or freedom had spent the last 18 months calling for the freedom of the actual kidnapped victim, the person who has actually been denied all of his rights and much more, Edan Alexander, then I'd be interested to hear these people's thoughts on Khalil. But they didn't. They have spent the last 18 months not just excusing the massacre, but in the case of Khalil and his group at Columbia University, actually praising the massacre. Let me just read, if I may, very quickly, two statements that every American should know about. The first is that the group, Columbia University Apartheid Divest, called October the 7th, the massacre that I write about in my book, quote, a moral, military, and political victory. Now, one of the other things that everyone should know about this group is that one of the things they call for, in their own words, is, quote, they say they are, quote, fighting for the total eradication of Western civilization. I'll read that again because it's so unbelievable. They are fighting for the total eradication of Western civilization. Now, I suggest that Secretary Rubio, was completely right when he said some weeks ago, what country would invite people into the country and allow them all the advantages of the country if the person in question uses their time in the country to destroy the country? Not just by, as in the case of Khalil and his group, intimidating Jewish students and threatening Jewish students and hounding them across their places of study, but by abusing the staff at the university, by physically harming people who worked there as janitors, by shutting down public buildings, by shutting down public highways, by many other things. What country in its sane mind would allow people in to do that? If I went and moved to Paris on a student visa, I think one of the things I would not do whilst there would be to try to overthrow the French state. Because if I did, I'd guess that I could get into trouble. This is not about the First Amendment's rights of an American citizen. This is about somebody coming to America who used his time in America to campaign and wage war against America.
And it's clear that the judge, the immigration judge, found that argument, and perhaps even those words that you read as submitted, we don't know the exact evidence, but perhaps as submitted by the Secretary of State, compelling to revoke a non-citizen's ability to stay in the United States and make those arguments against our foreign policy. Douglas, it feels like I've been spending hours with you recently, although we have just talked now for the first time in months. I've been listening to you in your debate with Dave Smith on the Joe Rogan Experience. I've been listening to this debate that is not untied to the conversation you and I have now, which is about when this sentiment that is very sympathetic to the Palestinian cause began to take over young people, and particularly young people here in the United States. For the audience, here's a little bit of the debate you've been having with Dave Smith.
Leveled by now.
Yeah.
But it did not go in to level the place like that. No.
Okay, they went in and leveled the place, but that wasn't their intention?
Let's just, I think, a part of a generation that's coming up has been told there is something especially wicked about Israel, and I think that people have been indoctrinated by very bad actors into this, and as a result have excused atrocities or will make excuses for them, make excuses for the people who do them. I think, in addition, it plays to some of the darkest things of the regional mind as well as the international mind.
For anyone interested in the longer 3-hour debate that covers ground from Ukraine to Israel, they can go check out the Joe Rogan Experience. Douglas, that particular portion of the debate, you were talking about the point of view among young people, not exclusively, but primarily, that is very sympathetic to the Palestinian cause. Dave would argue, and did argue to you, that the last 18 months of civilian death in Gaza is a reason for that sympathy. It seems there that what you allude to is the reason is much darker, and I understand you to mean anti-Semitism.
Absolutely. I think that it's extremely important for people to realize that, of course, it's not the case that any criticism of the Israeli government or Israel's actions is anti-Semitic. Of course not. But if you spend no time in recent years on the streets protesting against the mass slaughter going on in Syria, if you didn't come out one Saturday to protest against the actual genocide that is going on in Sudan, if you didn't ever come out on the streets to protest about the hundreds of thousands of people killed in Yemen, and then you decide, in the wake of the October the 7th massacre, day after day after day, whether it's a protester at Columbia or a so-called comedian like Dave Smith, to go on and lie and defame Israel, and two, in the case of many of these protesters, to praise Hamas, to actually exalt the massacre of Jews, then yes, obviously, it's anti-Semitism. And, you know, the question I really ask in this book, Will, is, first of all, I wanted to see the ramifications of the October the 7th massacre with my own eyes, which is why I got to Israel as soon as I could after the massacre, to see the victims, to speak with the families, to speak with survivors, to meet with them in hospitals, to go to the morgues, to see the effects of what Hamas did that day. That was the first reason. And the second reason was that I wanted to see Israel's response with my own eyes. And that was why for the last year and a half, I've spent most of my time in Israel and Gaza and Lebanon. The third thing, though, which is what I really want people to think about, what I want my readers to think about, is why is it that when a democracy and an ally of ours like Israel was attacked so barbarously by people who worship death, who glorify in death, who seek death, not just others' death, but their own, why in a fight between a democracy and a death cult do we have so many people in America, particularly young people, who have chosen to side with the death cult?
You know, I spent those 3 hours, I've not yet gotten to read on Democracies and Death Cults, which I intend to do, but I spent those 3 hours thinking that both of you made, at times, very valid points. I think one of the most compelling pieces of evidence to support what you just laid out for us that you made during that debate, Douglas, is that these celebrations, they were celebrations, and also protests, began on October 8th. And that is the most compelling evidence as to what they are in response to or what their message was, at least in that day, in that moment. Douglas Murray, check out on Democracies and Death Cults. Thank you so much, Douglas.
Great pleasure to be with you.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.